Hey Fitheads, today we talk with Marissa Graham, a personal trainer and coach and a dancer who has actual experience burnout to the point where she went to the hospital. And so she is now super well versed on how to deal with that and how to truly rest and recover to show up as a real human. Her words, which basically this is an hour making me realize I'm not a real human.
Yeah, I think it was funny. We started out with, I think you said it. People throw around the term burnout a little bit, but what does that actually mean? What does it look
Yeah,
like? What goes
the
into it?
definition, the three types, so interesting. Or
Yeah, that was really
three
helpful for
qualities.
for you. It was really helpful for you. Let me just speak for you.
Hey,
But you're right. I mean, people say, "Oh, I'm so burnt out." But it was fun to like get a more solid definition of burnout, what it is, what goes into it, and then beyond that, how to actually rest and recover. And separating rest and recovery, that was a big surprise for me. I didn't understand
yeah.
that at all before this episode.
And also helped me understand why I would even want to do it, right? It put me in the mindset of, oh, here's why it's important, and here's why all the ways I'll benefit.
Welcome to Total Fitheads.
Serious fitness for not so serious people.
Hi, Marissa. Welcome.
Hi, thank you.
I'm so pumped to chat with you. We have 2.5 dancers in the room right now.
Yes. Who's the half?
I guess the
Me.
half would be trained. Yeah, how do you qualify a half dancer? Is it training? Do you get like a black belt?
They should. They should have black belts.
Yeah, that's funny. What is the Yeah, there are there any sort of graduation or levels? I'm trying to think in
I
like
mean,
Russian ballet or something.
no, they just whip you into shape. They
Sure.
just kick your ass. Yeah.
So yeah, it sounds like you've had a the stereotypical dance past. Well, I don't know. I don't want to assume. Let us know your journey up until now. We'd love to hear a little backstory about
Yeah.
Marissa.
Yeah. So, I went to school for dance, which was a journey for sure. Um, Mostly in like modern contemporary dance, but did ballet growing up. Um, it was pretty stereotypical, there was a lot of toxicity, a lot of that kind of stuff. And then when I graduated, I was like, hey, I feel like I should know more about the human body as a dancer. So I got my personal training cert and did that for a while. Got it in 2016, but was like working multiple jobs and dancing as well, through that, dancing professionally. And in 2020, everything blew up, obviously, and all my in person jobs were no longer. And I moved online and started doing my own health coaching business there, personal training. Um, yeah, and kind of have blended this world of like fitness and dance and working with dancers, athletes, advanced movers to help them not burn out and help them train in a sustainable, joyful way.
For somebody that hasn't gone to school for dance or hasn't trained in ballet, modern, whatever, can
Oh, you
you
haven't?
lightly touch on what stereotypical toxic dance community is? I don't want to trigger anybody, but you know what I mean.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of commenting on bodies. Like I'll give you an example. When I went to college, so there's point, which is like when you're up on your toes. And that's a specific type of ballet dancing. And when I went to college, I absolutely loved point. And I was like, hey, I'd really love to perform or at least take class in point shoes. What does that look like? Yada, yada. And my professor just looked me up and down and went, you know, if you're over 120 pounds, you really shouldn't be going on point. It's not safe. So there's, yeah,
Okay.
the that.
Thanks, everybody. I'll see you,
It's like mic drop, great. Okay, perfect. So things like that, like grabbing, kind of like grabbing body parts and being like, get rid of this, tuck this in. Insinuating on like disordered eating, like kind of encouraging people to eat in a disordered way. Yeah, those are the big ends, at least.
Yeah.
I feel like we've made a lot more progress just in the general public with that kind of thing from when I was a kid. But specifically in this field, I imagine there are reasons not to make progress. And so people are sticking to the old ways. That's crazy.
Yeah.
I would have hoped things would have evolved. Also, a point is not good for people under 120 pounds either. My goodness.
Yeah, it's not really great for anyone. I got put, another maybe toxic thing, I got put in point shoes when I was like 7 or 8, when my bones were still developing. Yeah, so I've had lots of knee and joint issues growing up as well.
That's crazy. Yeah, my dance studio had a rule at 13 and up. It still feels pretty young, but like, wow, that's 7. My goodness.
Yeah.
Well, okay, can you talk about the transition from dance to the fitness world? Because I've seen that a lot with my dance friends, but it was just running. We didn't go to dance class anymore, so we all just did marathons because that was like what fitness was to us.
Totally.
So it seems a little different for you.
Yeah, it is interesting because we were taught, again, maybe another toxic dancing. We were taught like not to lift weights growing up. It was like yoga, Pilates was like considered your cross training, or just doing like 100 of back and forth tendus. Which
get those reps in.
Get those reps in. And I think I just had kind of a realization coming out of college that I really didn't know about anatomy. I really didn't know about like the physics of how my body was moving. I really wanted to understand that. So that's what got me into the personal training. And when I discovered strength training, I was like, well, this is different. And I saw a huge increase in my capacity to dance and my endurance and my ability to like hold things for longer, just like everything changed. So it was really the experience for me of combining those two and being like, oh, this is actually really helpful. I've been taught that this is, detrimental to dancers, but it's actually an extremely useful tool for us. So it was an interesting kind of realization to be like, everything I've been taught is a lie.
Fun.
Yeah, so crazy. And crazy that you were doing both simultaneously to actually see a difference. I feel like we need to tell the industry. But wait, you could be better dancers if only.
Right. And thankfully, I'm starting to see a lot more of that real cross training. Like there's a lot more out there. It's still not the majority, it's still the minority, but it is starting to shift, thankfully.
See, the problem is you deadlift and then we'll have no dancers left in the world because that's way more fun.
It's so true.
Theaters all have to close. They turn into gyms.
Yeah. Well, I did my first powerlifting meet and I was like, wait, I get to perform and lift weights at the same time? Like, give me a
And
break.
I can
This
wear
is
the same
amazing.
leotard.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's cool. So tell us about how you decided to then get into competing.
Yeah, it came from a goal of like, I just want to move my body in the strongest possible way I can. And that was powerlifting. Like, that's really what came to the forefront. And I think the performer in me was like, I just want to be on stage again. Like, I really want, so it combined those two worlds in a really beautiful way. And it wasn't like, I was like, yeah, I'm competing, but I really just want to see, like, for my own progress, how far I can take it. And I will probably do it again. The training was a bitch, but I would probably do it again.
So I feel like everyone's saying burnout these days.
Mm-hmm.
It's like very buzzwordy. I don't know. Can you even tell me like your definition of burnout?
Yeah. So burnout has three components. There's the emotional exhaustion piece, which is like the fatigue from caring too much. There's the depersonalization, so like lacking empathy, lacking compassion, lacking caring. And then there's the lack of self-efficacy. So feeling like, if you get accolades, you're like, nah, that's not for me, or you don't feel like a sense of accomplishment. And those are really the three components. So I agree with you that burnout is like everywhere. Everyone's saying they're burnt out. But you really need those three pieces in order for it to be considered burnout.
I hadn't heard about the depersonalization part of it. So this is affecting like your personal relationships. You basically turn into like an uncaring jerk to other people. That's a part of it.
Yeah. And that's why a lot of
Wow.
like caring careers, like nurses and people that have to care for others, that's why they are in burnout so often, because it's part of their job. And then they're finally like, oh, I can't do so much of this. So yeah, that's a big piece of it that I think a lot of people maybe don't know about or just don't understand, because it's like, yes, you're fatigued and you're like emotionally exhausted, but there's also that lack of caring, and there's also that lack of self-efficacy that contributes to it.
That's scary. It's a lot scarier than I thought.
It's a scary thing for sure.
And then all that emotional stuff, I'm sure affects you physically, right? So beyond emotionally exhausted, then you're also, not showing up for your body.
Right, exactly. And it makes it a lot harder to get into those physical activities, even though that's kind of one of the resolutions, one of the things that can be really helpful. But you get into this state where you're like, I'm completely burnt out. I know what's going to help me is physical activity. And yet there's this gap, right?
Right. Yet that's the last thing I want to do right now.
Yeah.
How long is this going to last? Is this, once I'm burnt out, is this the rest of my life? Is this an hour? What are we looking at?
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely, it can definitely last a decent amount of time. I've heard things like it takes you 3 years to get out of burnout. Like, people put these really specific timelines on it. I don't necessarily think that that's true. And from my clients' experience and my own experience, it probably took me about 6 months to really get over the hump. I've seen people turn it around in a month and be like in a better place. Maybe they're not like thriving, but they're at least closer to that surviving phase. So it kind of just depends on the person. It depends on the tools you have available to you. And it depends on how aware you are of it. If you're like, I am in burnout, I need to start addressing this right now, versus like being in it, but kind of lacking the awareness or the understanding that you're actually in it.
Is it tough to tell when you're in it because you're just so overwhelmed, or was it very clear like something's hit a wall?
Yeah. For me, I was aware that something was wrong, but it literally took me going to the hospital to being like, something is wrong, ma'am. Like, this is not okay.
Wow.
So sometimes it takes people that level. My goal with clients is to help bring awareness to them faster, to be like, hey, so I see you're emotionally exhausted. I see like you're lacking empathy for others. I see that you're lacking self-efficacy. We should probably talk about the fact that you're in a burnout phase. And it is a phase. It's not like for life unless it's not addressed, and then it potentially could be.
What leads up to this? Let's say I want to get burnout. What should I set myself up to do for success?
You should take on as much as possible, take on other people's responsibilities and emotions. You should not give yourself any rest or any time to recover.
Mm-hmm.
You should not complete your stress cycle, so just constantly be in chronic stress.
Swimming in cortisol.
Yeah, just swim in that cortisol.
Allie, how are you feeling right now?
Oh no, I don't take on anybody's emotions. So that leads me to a weird question that I don't know if there's an answer to or anybody's even thought about, but do empathic people, do extroverts, do people more tapped into others end up getting burnt out easier?
Yes, definitely. And that's, like I said, like the people that are in kind of these caring careers.
Yeah, okay.
And same with creatives, like people that are putting their, like dancers, for example, who are extremely vulnerable and putting their whole selves out there all the time. And they're like, here, take this is who I am, take it. And everyone's like, nah, I don't want it.
Everyone's like,
maybe if it was smaller, I'd want it.
Maybe.
Okay, so if you're trying to avoid that, tell me about that stress cycle.
Yeah. So basically, we get into this stress cycle, right? We see a threat, we orient ourselves to that threat. We either fight, flight, or freeze or faint. And then we should have some type of resolution. The issue is a lot of us don't have that resolution because, one, we're in society and like we have to be socially appropriate and we can't just like punch people in the face when we want to. Unfortunately. And also we, look out for our own safety, or we are basically, the stress is more than what our bodies can handle. Like our ability to cope with the stress has outweighed how much we can handle. So that's when chronic stress kind of comes into play. And to have a resolution, there's a couple different things that you can do. Physical activity is like number one in order to resolve, to complete that stress cycle. So yay, exercise. We love it. Things like crying, things like laughter, breathing, affection, like connecting with another person. These are all things that can help to complete the stress cycle. And when we're in burnout, even if we do these things, it needs to actually be like daily or multiple times a day in order to feel any kind of relief. So it's kind of like that thing where when you start working out, you're like, I don't know what enough is. It's the same thing with with burnout. Allie's face is amazing right now.
It's weird that that's just when you start working out, not years into your training age. No, it's fine. Go on.
No, I mean, look. But yeah, so I think I lost my train of thought.
That we need to cycle in and out of that, like,
Yes.
stress and recovering. I mean, I like to deadlift and cry at the same time. That seems useful.
You can bundle them. That's the best
Okay.
part about it. You can bundle that stress cycle.
So laugh, cry, pull ups,
Hug.
pull, yeah.
Full hug.
So daily. Yeah. And
Daily
it's not
is the
just
goal.
sleep.
It's not just sleep. Yeah. You got to
Although
have
I
those
imagine
connections.
sleep is a part of it.
Sleep is a huge part of it. But if we're talking about like rest is sleep and doing nothing, basically. When we're trying to recover or complete the stress cycle, we need some other strategies for that.
Oh, so those are two separate things.
Yeah. So recovery is like really bringing yourself back to a baseline. Rest is the doing nothing or the sleep. And I personally, I will interchange them, but they do kind of have their own definitions.
Yeah, because I feel like it's always rest and recovery as one thing. And then it's sort of lumped into, I guess, like sitting down and scrolling TikTok.
Right.
Or like, I'm in bed, I'm resting, but I'm on my laptop, or I'm, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, there has to be like some type of investment in it rather than just saying like, I'm resting, I'm on TikTok. Like I'm a proponent of, you can absolutely use those like numbing techniques to rest. Like everyone needs if you want to drink at the end of the night or you want to scroll, everyone needs some type of numbing activity. But if that's all you're doing for your rest or your recovery, you're probably not getting the full scope. And you might be feeling a little bit stressed.
This kind of goes back to what you were saying earlier in my face. What I saw online that you mentioned, just listen to your body, is terrible advice. I would love to dive into that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I feel like when we're first starting out, when we're really trying to understand what rest is, what recovery is, it's telling someone to just listen to their body is similar to telling someone like just eat when you're hungry when they've had like a history of disordered eating. It's like you can't really equate those, right? Like you need structure in order to start to understand what rest actually feels like. So I think adding structure into your day of like taking micro breaks, right? Like doing things that are built into the schedule that are like, I am going to just take time away from whatever I'm doing and rest or recover. It's really important, especially for people who don't understand how to rest. Like it's a skill and we have to put the reps in and understand how to do that rather than just throwing ourselves into it.
I love that.
Yeah.
Resting is a skill. Also, I suck at it. Okay.
Yeah.
I got to put in my reps.
Well, I mean,
Allie likes anything she can check off a checklist, including
it's true.
including rest.
You can tell I got so excited. I was like, ooh, it's a thing that I can what am I to do?
Nothing. I did it.
Yes.
I did nothing so hard.
So hard. I love that.
Have you found that people then start to get more of a sense, and they don't have to, they can start to trust their body again?
Yeah, eventually it becomes more natural and you can kind of see the ebbs and flows, and I think especially if you're training, you can really see the effects within your training of like, oh wow, I'm lifting a lot heavier this week because I rested. So you can kind of use those markers too. It's not all like intuitive, but I think it does become a little bit more natural for people once they start to build it in, but it has to be built in first. Like it can't just be like, just listen to your body.
I love the idea that your emotions are better, so your lifts are higher.
Yes. They're correlated for sure.
Sure.
But at the same time, I feel like you've talked about how people aren't, like, people think they're resting when they aren't really. Like this numbing business or this scrolling, having a drink, whatever. They think, okay, I'm just blowing off some steam. But you talk a little bit about how like when you get your rep it, like, to continue your metaphor, analogy, whatever, like I can go down and like kind of work out, but if I'm on my phone the whole time, or if I'm just flexing the mirror the whole time, or if I'm picking something on TV to watch the whole time, that's not exactly a real workout.
Right.
Whereas I think sometimes I think I'm resting and I'm sort of stressing myself out a little bit without noticing. Have you noticed that in your clients too, or is it?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's like the investment factor. Like for me, when I started really taking rest seriously, I had to put money on the table and be like, I'm going to go get a massage and I'm going to not have my phone near me, right? Or I'm going to go put myself in a sensory deprivation tank and I'm going to not have my phone near me. It's usually the phone, right? It's usually the phone. But yeah, I've had clients be like, yeah, I rested. I looked for auditions. I'm like, girl, that is not rest.
So
that's stress.
So emotionally taxing.
That is what the stress. Yeah. So there's a reframing that can happen, right? Like you can make a meal part of your rest. You can eat it slowly and mindfully and have that be part of, I'm saying rest, really recovery. But if the phone is near you and you're scrolling on TikTok, that's probably not contributing to it. So it's doing one thing fully. That's really where it happens. If you're kind of half in, half out, you're kind of half-assing it, you're probably not getting the full benefits of that recovery.
Yeah, so is it the screens or is it the multitasking that you find is worse, or is it sort of a combination?
I think it's a combination of both. Yeah.
Great.
Unfortunately, yeah.
I should be responding to emails in between sets.
I was telling Allie the other day that one of my newer-ish goals that I've started and stopped a couple of times is not being on my phone in bed before I go to sleep or right after I wake up. And I was saying, the problem is my alarm, or if I want to, if there's an important email first thing in the morning that I need to get to immediately, or, I have all these things in my brain that I've built up. And Allie was like, well, can't you just have your phone next to your bed and not look at your phone? And I was like, no, that's absurd. That doesn't compute. That's just a lack of, I don't know, maybe it's my own self control, or maybe it's just that I'm so addicted, plugged in, I don't know, whatever nice way you want to put it.
I mean, I think environment plays a huge part, right? Like the environment you're putting yourself in is going to dictate what you do or don't do. So having the phone by the bed, yeah, if that's a habit you've created, like it doesn't matter how much self-control you have. Eventually, you're going to pick it up. The donuts are in the kitchen. They're sitting there right on the table, presented to you.
They're going bad.
Eventually, it's going in my face. Like,
yeah, exactly.
You need a new bed. Reset. This new bed is the one that you never touch your phone in.
Right. My sleeping bed, not my work bed.
your sleeping bed. You need 2 beds.
Right. One's a hammock, actually. So
Even that same thing on a smaller level, I find I'm like, okay, I spend a lot of time on Instagram. I need to stop opening the Instagram app. You just be on the phone and not open Instagram. No, that's not possible for me. I've had a little bit of success by moving the icon to another page, but you always end up making the habit again, almost like compulsively open it. Even like, in between going from whatever work to the bathroom. It's like, why did I do that? I don't even want to look at this.
Yeah, it is challenging. It's one of those things where it's like you have to create more barriers, like when you're with habits, like creating more barriers on top of, so maybe like adding the time stopper or whatever, the timer of like, for me, I have Friday through Sunday, Instagram is off limits. And yeah, sometimes I hit 15 minutes, allow for 15 minutes, but then it'll shut me out of it again. So adding those barriers is kind of a helpful tool when it comes to that stuff.
Wow, 3 whole days.
Yeah.
Interesting. I like that
It's taken me a long time to get there. It's been a slow build.
Do you feel more clarity? How has it benefited you now that you don't do that?
I feel less stress. Like 100% less stress. I feel like I can put more, especially as like content creators, I feel like I can put more creative energy into the times that I am on there. And the other like rule that I've made for myself is if I'm consuming, I have to also create something. So if I'm scrolling, I have to go and post a story or post a reel or whatever. I can't just be mindlessly taking it in.
Yeah, because you touched on something that I struggle with. I don't know if this is universal, right? Because we are creators, but I have to be on there. It's my career.
Right.
But the idea of doing it purposefully, I think, is the difference here.
Yeah.
Huh. Right. The problem is though that I this is just a giant therapy session for the 3 of us, I suppose. But it's I'll see something and I'll be like, all right, great. I'll put that in my thoughts folder. And that's I haven't made it, but I have started. I got an idea there. I started something. But then it's like
is that a physical folder or is that your own brain thoughts?
He prints out an Instagram and puts it in.
It's a manila folder.
Trevor Keeper. Yeah, I have a thoughts folder too. It's very useful. I've never looked at it. Max, you can make a folder with a friend now. We have a thoughts folder as well, our own.
Yeah, but you like Evernote. I'm not an Evernote guy.
Okay.
It's too much of a barrier there. I don't understand how it's working. I feel like too much of a hippie. I don't know. As
a person that likes specifics and tracking, I saw you mentioned specifically on your social media 42% rest. Tell me about this number.
Yeah, so that came from a book called Burnout. I have it right here. I'm going to show you. Called Burnout, The Secret to Unlocking the Stress Cycle. And it's 2 sisters, 2 PhDs, and their research has shown that 42% rest is the minimum amount of rest that we can take so that we're being proactive about it. Meaning, if we don't take 42% rest, it's going to eventually smack us back in the face. We're going to get sick. We're going to sleep for a day. We're going to have injury, something is going to happen that's going to be negatively affected because of that. We're not taking the 42%. So they break it up. They do it daily, but you can actually do it over like a week or more. So you don't necessarily have to be taking 42% rest every single day. You can take bigger chunks if that is what your schedule allows. Like people who work 9 to 5 and then have weekends off can do it that way. But they break it up into a couple different categories. So there's, similarly to the stress cycle, there's movement, there's connection, there's eating, and then there's like a fourth kind of wild card category where you can do something creative, you can do more movement, you can do more connection, more eating, whatever. But this is really the way to not getting burnt out. And like I said, it's a way to be proactive about your rest and also kind of reframing that rest into different categories. So you're not just thinking like rest equals doing nothing. Again, I'm kind of interchanging rest and recovery. Those really are recovery practices. But yeah, that's what that 42% is.
Do you agree? Have you found that?
I have.
Are you like a 45?
I'm like, well, I mean, the sleep part, so sleep is like 7 to 8 hours. I'm probably a 9-hour gal.
Let's go.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm probably closer to that 50%.
You live till failure, you sleep till failure.
Exactly. Until my eyes can no longer be closed. Exactly.
Till failure.
Max, are you hitting 42?
I think so. Yeah.
What?
Well, sleep.
It's really, yeah.
I get my sleep. I get my zone out.
That's
I
only...
walk the dog.
Okay.
And is it 42% of your time in general? Or is that 42% of your focus? Or
yeah, 42% of your time. So like they count 14 hours for like all of the life things, being a human things. And then each of those categories is about 30 minutes. So like if you're prepping your food, if you're like eating in your car while driving, like that doesn't count.
And filming yourself because that's a great moment.
Yeah. Practicing the piano, like that doesn't count if you're doing all that at the same time. But yeah, it's not as overwhelming as it may sound at first, which is great because I think a lot of us, when we start to think about rest, we're like, oh my God, I have to, like I was saying, you have to build it in, right? But you might already have a lot of those practices built in. It's just about reframing it into rest, because when we think about it in that way, then we can actually reap the benefits of it. When we're just kind of going about our day and not being like, oh yeah, this is helping me to recover, then we're not reaping the benefits that we could be.
Did you find it was helpful to, when you were in sort of that rut sort of feeling, did you find it was very helpful to book the massage or sensory deprivation or whatever to sort of like reframe yourself? Or did that sort of turn into something like, cool, this is a new interest. Now I get to go, focus on this.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was partly like desperation. I was like, I have to get out of this headspace. Like, this is so detrimental to my mental health, to my physical health. I just put myself in the hospital. Like, what am I doing? Right. So I think if people are starting to feel that way, or if they've experienced that, going to the more extremes and putting like I said, putting money on the table is really helpful, because it's like you're forcing yourself into an environment where you have to do nothing. Like, okay, you're just gonna squeeze my body, thank you so much, or I'm just gonna lay here in this tank. And those are temporary fixes, but it's really the daily practices that are going to help maintain.
I feel like there was a time when I had a revelation about specifically working out, that it's like, well, the recovery time is useful because that's how you're going to come back stronger. You need to focus on that. But then now this is a separate revelation where it's like the rest time mentally and emotionally is helpful, because then I can perform mentally and emotionally better when I come back. Do you see? Is that like an apt parallel that I'm speaking about?
Yeah, definitely. I think allowing ourselves to think outside of just physical rest and like really tapping into emotional, mental, creative, sensory, like there's 7 different types of rest. And if you tap into all of those, you're really just a full-fledged human. Like you can show up as a full-fledged human in your training and outside of that, rather than just thinking about it in such a small box of, oh, I'm just resting physically. Like you kind of get to show up as a complete person, which is always, that's my goal.
Yeah. It's weird though it's weird to sort of focus on the idea that to completely focus on one thing, when so much of everybody's daily life now is multitasking.
Yeah.
You know, I'm on speakerphone in the car while I'm eating my breakfast and listening to a podcast. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Why did we do that? Or you know what I mean? Like, where did that come from? And how do you fight it? And how do you have you actually found, at least in your clients, that when people focus on one thing, it is more effective? Or is it, or because it feels like a bad idea, but everybody's just like, well, you know, that's what it is. And in some way, you know, the multitasking game, you are making incremental improvements in everywhere, but do you actually make much larger jumps when you're focused, or do you?
Yeah, I just want to say, I feel like if I stop multitasking, then I'll fall behind. And so that's a part of the reason why I'm like, focus on one thing.
Yeah, I think to start, something that can be helpful is to bundle your rest. So like if you're going on a walk, also call a friend, right? Like that's the connection piece. And we can start to bundle those things so it doesn't feel like too daunting. Because that's the other thing, is like if it feels hard, or if it feels like, I don't really want to do that, if it doesn't feel natural or easy, then it's not going to easily fall into your day. So I think about, like multitasking your rest, you can do that too. And as long as you're taking different kind of recovery or rest practices and putting them together, like again, you can be scrolling on your phone while eating your meal. It's not going to be the most beneficial, but maybe call a friend or hug your partner or whatever. You can kind of start to bundle those things, and then it won't feel as daunting as like, no, I can't just do one thing.
Get back in the deprivation tank.
Yeah.
With my waterproof phone.
If you've never done, just as a tangent, if you've never done a deprivation tank, I highly recommend it. It is one of the most, it's very anxiety producing for the first like 10 minutes, because you're like, yes. And then you start to really, I don't know, like things just kind of start to melt away, at least for me. Um,
That was in your
it's stuff,
first session, or it took
yeah.
multiple times going before you melted?
I would say in the first session, maybe it took me like, I don't know, time is non-existent in the tank, so I don't know how
I
long it
know.
actually took.
I was in
I
there
was in
for a
there for
second,
7 years.
Have you done them?
Yes, once, but it wasn't like, wow, I got to keep doing that. But it sounds like you
Mm,
did it, and there was something so rewarding about it, you kept going back.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's different for each person, I guess. But for me, I think it was the investment of putting money on the table for my rest and literally putting myself in an environment where I could not do anything else. Like I had to just sit there and kind of reflect.
Oh, we definitely had different mindsets. I was filming it for YouTube, and I was like, let me try this different weird experience and show everyone. And so clearly, I was not doing it the correct way. Now looking back, I realize in this moment.
I mean, I don't think there's a correct way to do it. I think it's also valid to want to show other people like what's up with it and what it's about. But it might be worth trying it for yourself.
So, do you suggest a weekend kind of full taking off thing, or is it different for each person? And is it more effective to have that break at the end, or yeah, is there a best practice for when to start fitting this in?
Yeah, it really depends on your lifestyle and your schedule. I have so many clients with such varied lives. Um, and I don't think it's more or less effective if you do it like big chunks at a time or daily. Um, it just kind of depends on, yeah, what your schedule looks like. You can break it up into the day, you can break it up into like all at the end of the day, you can break it up into the weekend. As long as you're hitting that 42%, that's really what matters, but you can break that up throughout the week.
And you mentioned 7 different types of rest. What is that list?
Okay, so there's physical, mental, sensory, spiritual, emotional, creative, and the seventh. What is
Wild
the
card.
seventh? The wild
Okay.
card.
Yeah.
Emotional, mental,
Okay.
obviously. Yeah.
Sensory, interesting.
Yeah. Sensory deprivation tank. I'm just
Yeah, there you
saying.
go. Like stop looking at stuff or go look at nature or whatever.
Mhm.
So
Don't feel
tell me,
overwhelmed.
no, like yeah,
Yeah, that
you
was
can tell him I'm
quite
just
the
like
list.
pausing and overwhelmed and thinking about 42%. Ah,
Well, that's the thing is like you don't want it to feel. I know you said you like to-do lists, so maybe for you adding it to the to-do list is helpful, but I've noticed for clients if it feels like it's a I have to kind of thing,
mm,
it's going to be a lot more difficult than like, oh, I want to do this thing, or like doing this is going to help me with X, Y, or Z. So it is how you approach it too. Like, don't feel like you have to start with all 7 of those categories or even honestly even doing anything differently than you're already doing. Like you can do the things that you're doing and just start to be like, this could be recovery, right? Like my meal could be my recovery. Walking my dog could be my recovery. And then you can add from there rather than being like, oh my God, I've never creatively rested. How the hell am I going to do that? Right.
so I'm intentionally getting out of fight or flight. You also mentioned 2 other ones. I thought it was just fight or flight.
Yeah. There's freeze and faint. So if you've ever like froze up in a situation or fainted.
Oh, faint.
Yeah.
I thought you meant like
Oh
fake,
yeah.
Fake a
fake.
punch.
I
Yeah, where your
was like, that's
body
part of
just
fight.
comes up.
I think that's in fight. Yeah.
Well, I don't want to give away my style, but yeah, for sure.
So you're still dancing, yes? Tell us
I
about your relationship
am.
with that now and what you're doing in terms of being a dancer.
Yeah. So I did take some time off away from it. And now it's more of a hobby rather than my career, which has been a huge shift in how I actually approach it. I get to do it for fun, which is pretty fantastic. And yeah, it's been a big mental shift, which I think like a lot of athletes and dancers and people that did things seriously growing up can relate to, because you have to shift this mindset of like, I'm training for the next thing, I'm training for the next thing, I'm training for the next thing, to just, I'm doing this as a hobby or I'm doing it for fun. So it's been a really big like mind game to try and tell myself that it's okay not to be getting better and better and better, but just being able to maintain, which again, I feel like in training is also a thing where you're like, just being in maintenance mode is okay, like allowing yourself to be okay with that. So it really parallels, yeah, like training for a powerlifting meet versus just training for life. It's been a big shift for me for sure.
Yeah, there's one, I forget where, I think you said it on one of your posts somewhere, but it was soreness is not an indicator of how hard you worked. How did you
Feel
figure that
attacked.
out? Because that's the total opposite of my entire physical career.
I can't
And
walk
Yeah.
today.
also,
I
and
earned it.
even worse, because then I just go right back to practice, and I'm like, well, I'm sore, but I'll just push through it. But that's like
Right.
typically
Yeah.
not always the best way to do it. How'd you figure that out?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I do think soreness can be an indicator, but I don't think that we should be training to soreness all the time. Just like being a dancer, you don't want to be training to your absolute failure all the time. Like you just fall on the floor and you're
Arabesque to
done.
failure. Go.
Exactly.
0, 1/2.
My half dancer. Yeah. So yeah, I think there's just kind of a middle ground that we can start to find for ourselves, because especially as a dancer, the mindset was always like train to failure, train to failure, train to failure. And I have found, and I found for my clients, that that's just not beneficial and it's not sustainable. Like you're going to run yourself into the ground eventually.
Yeah, sustainable. I mean, we have kind of talked about this a lot on the podcast, where the shift from peaking or achieving some sort of goal and like changing the goal to be I don't know, live forever. Like how do I train, like you said, sustainably and think about it that way? That's been a tough shift for me, as opposed to like I don't need to clean and jerk as much as possible. So then
Mm-hmm.
what is my mind now focusing on? So
Yeah.
it feels like it parallels that kind of thing where you get older and you realize like it's not about peaking anymore. It's about, staying healthy.
Yeah, exactly. I think the question I like to ask is like, what would me in 30 years want? Right? Like, I today want to push myself as much as possible, but in 30 years, I want to have my knees.
So useful. Yeah.
Like, I want them to function. So I'm probably not gonna squat the heaviest I ever squatted just because I want to. Like, I'm gonna
Because,
It's a Tuesday.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
on a Tuesday. Um,
That's such
and
a
I
good,
think
wow. I feel like I'm gonna get a lot of help out of that. Like thinking about
good.
screwing over future me.
Yeah.
Huh.
And like wanting to
Interesting.
be the most badass grandma. Like I want to be the most badass grandma. So how am I going to do that? I'm not going to push myself to failure today.
What's crazy to me is that you shift your mindset so much that the thing that caused your burnout is now the thing that you use for rest. Is
Mm.
that would you say that you go dance now as like rest and recovery kind of thing mentally?
Yeah, I've actually never thought about it like that.
That's insane. You're doing the
Yeah,
same
that's
thing
crazy.
and your brain is completely shifted and it makes it completely different experience.
Yeah. It was a total 180. It was a total 180.
Wow.
Yeah.
There's no good or bad, but thinking makes it so. I like to quote Shakespeare in every episode, so
I'm glad you snuck that one in.
I think that was probably not the correct wording, but the idea is there.
It sounds right. It sounds great to me.
Awesome. Well, this has been so fantastic. Thank you for chatting with us.
Thank you so much.
And where can the Fitheads go find you online and all of your training and everything you offer?
Yeah, so I'm at Marissa Graham Coaching on Instagram, and then marissagraham.com is my website, and all my links are there to sign up for coaching and all that good stuff.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm gonna go take 42% rest now.
Yes.
And thank you to the Fitheads. If you can rate and review on Apple Podcasts, that helps us out a whole lot. And we'll see you next week.